We are the semi-official Discord of the Men's Human Rights subreddit. This week's issue, we are talking about International Men's Day, which is coming up next week, Friday, the 19th. More specifically, we'll be focusing on some posts on Twitter for this he for she women where they're talking about International Men's Day.
Basically what's going on here is that he for she is retweeting a article by Forbes where they start off talking about International Men's Day, and then they use that to segue into how can men help women, and then they spend the majority of the article talking about women for an article on International Men's Day. And this is he for she is quite happy about this article. Here is how men and women can work towards greater gender equality in the workplace. But really, the entire article is about how men can help women. And this is basically a theme for these people. They will take International Men's Day, or really anything that we do, and they will try and twist it into something that is all about women. And, you know, it's disgusting, really, especially when you consider how angry and vicious they get when you bring up gender parity in any kind of issue, when they're talking about something like domestic violence or rape or something like that, and they're saying that only women are affected by this. You go in there and you mention that actually men are affected by this equally as much as women, and they go absolutely nuts.
I'm looking through the article from the perspective that Forbes comes from, that is business. This is not unexpected, and it serves their purposes, which is, business. And they understand very clearly that in this day and age, business is about women. It's about pandering to and supporting and promoting women as consumers, women as producers, women as leaders, and women as the core of employment, career, and employer growth. They are doing what they need to do to remain Forbes. It doesn't address anything about men. They don't care about us. There's nothing here in this article that is hostile to men. It just treats us as if we're invisible. And that's the more difficult problem to tackle. It's one thing to go up against, real direct hostility, but it's a lot harder to get the attention of someone who is pretending you aren't there. And that's what they're doing. They do that regularly. This is by no means the first Forbes article I've ever read that pretends, men have no problems. Yeah, it's par for the course.
Yeah, it's not just he for she and Forbes getting in on this, though. If you look through the tweets, one of the first tweets that happened with this was the Women's Equality Party for Cheshire. I think they retweeted it, and they are saying stuff like, all men can be a positive role model. All men RSVP some sort of, I think it's some sort of event they're running. Yes, a weekend event. And they're coming up with hashtags like all men can and all men. It's just kind of ridiculous. This is several.
The point is that what Cheshire East Branch is saying is true. We can be positive role models. We can be for she. We can do all of these things. But the point is, why should we? No. I mean, it is never a bad idea to to support women, treat them well, be honest with them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and role model for them. It's never a bad idea until it is. If we're if men in very large numbers are working consistently against their own interests, those same women that these people are promoting, they will suffer also. That there's no way around that. But they're right. We can do all these things. But should we? And if they never answer that question, then, I say it's better not to be that. It's better not to be a role model. Be a good person. Don't act up. Don't make trouble. But until they can come back and say, here is what it will do for everyone, then no, I don't, I'm not that obedient. I don't just do as I'm told. I will do something somebody suggests if it really looks like a good idea, but none of this looks like a good idea.
That's the reason why I think if you're gonna be a role model to a certain group of people, then you should make up your own way for what you want to promote and what idea you want to set as a standard as by activating for. And now I'm doing it. I do have a very consistent model system and things that I think people should do, and I'm going to promote it to other people. So I'm trying to be a good role model for others, if that could even be a thing. But they don't set the standard. I set my standard for how I should behave, and then if that's gonna do good, then people can follow if they want to. It's their choice. But I'm doing it, and I think it's gonna work.
I just wanted to add something here. Now here's the thing. I do believe that just at some level, especially the he for she thing, they do have somewhat good intentions because they think that helping women will eventually help men because according to the feminist viewpoint, the whole reason why men have so many problems is because of the unfair expectation that is put on men. And they think that that is because they view society views women as weak or inferior or whatever, right? So they think that if men spend all of their time helping women, then it means that men are eventually going to get help too. But why I disagree with that is because let's say, for example, best case scenario, that it's true that the whole reason why men are having all of these problems is because society views men as weak and that kind of thing. Sorry, not men, but women as weak, and all of that. It still would not help completely eradicate men's issues. And the reason why this is because men's issues need, a bottom up approach. We don't need more, men saying, I was abused by my wife. Because if a man did say that he was being abused by his wife, he would not be given help. He would be arrested. This is what people don't understand. It's not about the fact that men don't talk about these issues. It's the fact that when they do talk about these issues, people are not ready to hear them. I will give you an example. When I was researching the video that I posted last night, it was about male victims of rape. I came across some really, really, really disturbing stories. And yes, a lot of the men were not willing to talk about the fact that they were raped. But do you know why they didn't want to talk about the fact that they're raped? Not because, oh, it's because, masculinity or anything like that. It's because, and this is extremely sad, their wives would leave them if they found out that they were raped. So it became a very, very sad situation for a number of men. And the reason why their wives left them after they admitted they were raped was because they said, well, you're a man, you're supposed to protect me. How can you protect me if you yourself have been raped? So it was a very, very, very depressing situation for the man, because imagine you have just been a victim of sexual assault, and your wife, like, in some of these stories, the second that the men opened up to their wives, the wives would pack their things and leave immediately. Like, have you ever heard of how sad that is? It's definitely a big problem. And this isn't going to be helped by saying, oh, men should speak up about their issues, because when they are ready to speak up about their issues, nobody wants to listen, unfortunately, right? So if even if a feminist did say, oh, it's because of, let's say, toxic masculinity, that men don't wanna talk about their issues. It's not. It's a much more heavy situation than that. And okay, let's say, for example, just to give you another example, let's say, for example, that a guy is being abused by his wife, and he comes forward and he tells everyone, I've been abused by my wife. You know, people are just going to, worst case scenario, they will say that, um, you know, or rather, worst case scenario, they will either laugh at him or he could even be arrested. And in the best case scenario, he won't be arrested, but there are no domestic violence shelters that men are supposed to go to, you know? So how are you going to solve men's issues by just telling them, oh, you need to be more like women? It's not going to help. It's not going to help them. It's not going to help anybody. It's just going to be another horrible situation. So that is why even though I don't hate them, I don't hate anyone. I don't hate feminists. I don't hate anyone. I hate sometimes seeing men who were themselves a victim of abuse now start saying, "Oh, it's because we live in a misogynistic patriarchal society that I was treated that way." That's not the reason. And he hopes one day that it's going to change and that it's going to reduce if we have a so-called gender equal society. But it doesn't. It really, really, really doesn't. So I would say that, the solution that we need is to work on our own solutions and actually have a top-down approach, to fixing men's issues. Things like having more domestic violence shelters for men, things like changing laws, that kind of thing. And yeah, even telling men that their masculinity is good, but it's totally up to them to define, their own masculinity and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's just my input.
I
This
do
is
agree with
why,
that 100%. I would also like to add that whenever like men try to, not men, but like people in general want to change laws to make them more gender equal, the feminist establishment are always going to block it. They do it in basically all countries whenever they can. I can give like 8 examples just like out of memory.
Yeah, this
every country they do
India.
that.
Like I think it was India where they said that if they made the rape law gender neutral, then men could start using it against women, which is I mean, there might be some men who would do that. However, I mean, it's for the betterment of all male victims of sexual assault that such a law is passed. It's
Yeah,
horrific that in such a big country, India has the 1/5 of the world's population in that country, and they don't have a law that says that if a woman sleeps with a man without his consent, that it's illegal, and also that if you're a man, you can literally go to jail just for having consensual sex with a woman, but that doesn't result in you getting married to her.
And if the woman rapes the man, he can go to jail. There was a recent case of a boy who was sent to juvenile detention after being repeatedly raped by his sister until she got pregnant.
was that in
Uh,
India?
yeah, that was in India. It's not just India
Why
where they're
though?
doing that though. It's this has happened in Palestine and Israel as well. And in the UK, they tried to take a neutral domestic violence law that was being put through Parliament and destroy it. Basically, they wanted to remove the gender neutral language and insert the Duluth model language, only men hitting only women as the dynamic. They partially succeeded with gendering of the introductions of the law, and in sections basically saying that it should be taken into account the quote unquote gendered nature of domestic violence, which is the exact language they were hammering on Twitter. It's to get back to what we were talking about a little earlier, with the stories where men are trying to open up to their wives and their wives are, or their girlfriends are just abandoning them. I've heard several stories where the wife or girlfriend wants the man to open up and she begs him to open up. And as soon as he opens up, she loses all interest into him. Like she feels the interest in him just dry up. And the more the man opens up, the more she starts to think of him as a friend instead of her love interest.
That's what
And
happened to me.
Yeah.
yeah,
I do believe that if he basically that happens, I think he's kind of like dodged a bullet, in a way, because like why wouldn't anybody want to be in a relationship with someone who thinks that way?
Yeah, it's very depressing that a lot of men feel like they can't be open with the people that they're in a relationship with. And obviously, from a more casual standpoint, this is horrible, right? But I just want to quickly explain, what I was reading yesterday. Now, in American society, getting divorced and getting remarried is not really such a taboo thing, I would say, especially these days. And being a male victim of rape is very sad, but it's not like 100% a taboo thing in American society. I don't know, like maybe someone can correct me. I know we still have problems in that area, but at least a man who's been a victim of rape won't expect to be jailed, or anything of the sort, right? But in the research that I was doing yesterday, this is not an American country. This is not like a North American country. This is an African country, right? Where number one, a lot of the laws say that if you're, well, it's not explicitly stated that a male victim of rape will go to jail or anything. What actually happens is that if you go and report, they just assume that you're gay for some reason. If you're a man and you're reporting that you've been raped, and then you can go to jail because of the anti-homosexuality laws. Which is horrific, right? And if for example, if for example, people come to this woman and then she asks her, let's say, why did you rape Onyango, for example, which is like an example of an African name, and then she tells them that he was raped, so I had to leave him. He was raped by another man. Trust me, that guy's life is destroyed. He's going to be completely ostracized. In the words of once male rape survivor, male rape victims in African countries are quote unquote despised. So it's of course men are human. I'm not saying that what you said is not important. Of course it is important, but I'm just trying to tell you that in this situation it's much 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 more serious than simply a guy feeling like he can't open up to his girlfriend. Do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah, I understand what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, like I could add this, like in African countries, there have been histories and current states of anti-male, anti-gay laws. Fortunately, that have many of those have been abolished in some African countries, but it's still like an issue. As I lived in Africa, I know a little bit. I know a lot about history. I guess Kate knows basically just as much, if not more. But just wanted to add that.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons I get really angry at them saying that men don't suffer systemic discrimination, only gay men, black men, and so on. Like it's all narrowed down to certain types of men, and it's
Yeah, like
all
cis white
actually
men.
racism. Yeah, it's all
Actually, I
actually
would.
racism and stuff. And what they're actually doing is they're subdividing men into smaller and smaller categories. And the entire plan there is to make sure that men can't be seen as a group and they can't rally together and realize that actually it's mostly black men who are being lynched, not black women, not black people, black men. Like historically speaking, I mean.
We actually been talking about this like in other chats. We basically been talking about homophobia and racism in most historical states cases and also current cases tend to be I mean, like, misandry tend to be the driving force behind racism and homophobia, right? If you go to homophobia and racism against men, regardless of what race, right, tend to be far, far, far more hardly fueled and far more aggressive and far worse than racism and homophobia that isn't directed towards men. Actually, I would actually go so far as to say that if basically every most peak examples of homophobia and racism historically and currently, it is mainly anti-male homophobia and anti-male racism, because the men who are of those demographics tend to be the primary targets of violent racism and violent homophobia. And the rhetoric behind racism and homophobia in a violent scenario tend to also be anti-male, because they always use the men as a threat narrative in order to say why homosexuality and another race are bad. So basically, if people everybody, Nisa, I'm gonna say this: all the people who deny misandry, 100% of people who deny misandry promotes racism and homophobia. 100%, no exception.
Now the problem with this sort of thinking is that they will discuss the intersection between, let's say, for example, being black and female. They will discuss the intersection between being a homosexual and being a woman. They will discuss the intersection between being transgender and being a woman. And then they'll say transphobia is caused by misogyny, which is completely stupid, a very, very stupid thing to say. But they will acknowledge that different types of discrimination can kind of coexist and come together to be this kind of huge, big, ugly melting pot of discrimination. Now the problem is they refuse to do that for men. They can only say, well, it's because let's say, for example, if they're talking about the oppression of black men, they'll say it's because they're black, not because they're male. And then they'll say that, they'll say, for example, if he's not being oppressed because he's gay, he's not being oppressed because he's male, he's being oppressed because he's gay. And it's actually the patriarchy because men like lesbians or whatever, whatever stupid reason they give. But the issue is, it's not mostly black women who are being shot by the police. In fact, a black woman is even less likely than a white man to be killed by the police. It's not black women who are being killed disproportionately in gang violence. It's mostly men who are doing that, who are being killed. It's not mostly women being killed by these, how do I say, these really violent drug dealers. you know it's men who are doing that. And it's people need to discuss the intersection between these groups. So I was discussing, and I actually got very disappointed with someone who called themselves an MRA. um they we were discussing, I was basically telling them, the MRM, the men's rights movement, needs to be a pro woman, pro POC, and pro LGBTQ place. It's not mandatory that they discuss women's issues. In fact, usually, it should mostly be for discussing men's issues, within the MRM, or completely for discussing men's issues in the MRM. But if you want to be like a men's rights activist, you need to discuss, black men's issues, and also gay men's issues, even transgender men's and even transgender women's issue. If you're looking at it from the purpose of, them being an assigned male at birth person. So, this person completely disagreed with me. They said, no, we should not allow those groups to enter within the MRM because it's supposed to be for men. And then I told him, well, gay men and non-white men exist. Do you want them to just be completely excluded? And he didn't really have an answer for me, right? So I think that the MRA should always be inclusive of these groups, because any movement that is talking about a particular person, a particular group of people, it needs to be, from how do I say, from more of a complex standpoint. Gay men are not always going to have the same issues as straight men. For example, we could make the argument that, gay men are less likely to, lose their kids, after a divorce because the person that they were married to was not a woman. And then also straight men are not going to have the same issues as a gay man, because we could also say, for example, that in several countries, gay men are still being killed and targeted because of their sexuality, right? So we can't have the MRM without discussing these issues from a more intersectional standpoint, right? I think the issue is that they have a big problem with the men saying, yes, this happened to me because I'm a man. They have a really big problem with men doing that. And it's very wrong. But we need to do that. We absolutely need to do that.
Well,
Like-
not only do we need to do that, but I'll go back to the Forbes article and the Twitters. The point is that we can do that without bending the knee to the establishment. We can say, we have no problem being inclusive, and we have no problem supporting women in their issues. We have no problem supporting LGBTQ people and their issues, because the fact is we don't. That none of that is difficult. None of that is some burden that that we have to accept in order to get along. It's just the reasonable and honorable thing to do. But the point is that our movement should make it clear that we're every bit as aware of the issues that women go through and that LGBTQ people go through as they are. It's just that they are doing it wrong, and they have an incentive of a financial and political and socially influential incentive to keep doing it that way until we make them stop. Forbes magazine is not going to change their tune until it becomes very clear that if they don't change their tune, they're going to lose money, because that's what they care about. They're pretty straightforward about it. So everything you just said, Deja, is correct. It's just a matter of also understanding that, we should do that, yes, but it's not hard. It's very easy. It's very easy to be supportive and to be compassionate and to be caring toward people who are different than we are. It's not that hard. It's just a matter of saying we can do it. Not only can we do it better.
Just looking
Yeah.
at the Forbes article's image is quite interesting because they've accidentally spelt out the entire article in it. If you notice, it's three little men, and then somebody's coming along and trying to shuffle in a woman, in the sense that
Yeah,
they're
that was
basically-
cute.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like to think that somebody who knew what the article was really about decided to troll them a little bit. But yeah, it's like they're coming along onto our day, International Men's Day, and shoving like women's issues and trying to redirect it. And it's I can't get over how blazing it is. But the good news is that scrolling down the International Men's Day hashtag itself reveals by and large that not only have we got a lot of men's groups I didn't even know existed, but we also have a lot of fairly mainstream groups. We've got some football player, I don't know what they're called, player companies, I don't know, football groups promoting Men's Day and wanting to talk about men's issues. We've got all sorts of things. I can actually scroll down them if you want, and we can have a look at some of them.
But I would also like to add a potential solution where we can have the people who don't really want to get on board with all the different intersectional populations, like which I am, of course, on board with, right? And that is the reason that not all people who care about the men's rights movement, who care about men's rights issues, are going to care equally about all men's rights issues, right? One example of this may include some people might care a lot about circumcision, right? And then some people might care much more about family court or about positive or negative reproductive rights. While right, and some people might care about more of these issues compared to the others, and some might probably care about other issues that I haven't, like divorce, that I even haven't mentioned. And then some people might care a lot about how men impact racism, and some of them might care more about the racism men who are of either black specifically, some care more about European race specifically, or some care more about Asian specifically, right? Or some people might care more about men who are gay specifically, or men who are disabled specifically, as an example, right? So people could don't have to care about all the intersectional identities, right? They can just live into the other MRAs to care about the intersectional identities, right? But the important thing is that there are room for people to advocate for every single other identifiable group that could hypothetically and provably be the victims of other forms of discriminations, and that usually tend to intersect with anti-male discrimination and anti-male oppression.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you, Jay Will, because in my opinion, if I'm not fighting for Jay Will and Ma as much I'm fighting for what about Taz? Who's straight. If I'm not fighting for Zader as much as I'm fighting for um Rocco, who lives in the US, if I'm not fighting for, you know, any of our transgender, members, as much as I'm fighting for the cisgendered members, then who am I really fighting for? You know, I don't want to just be for one group and let all the other men just, disappear. Eventually, the group will just get smaller and smaller as more people just get excluded. We can't say, you know, if a gay man comes into the group, we can't say, well, you're excluded, you know, or if a non-white man comes into the group, we say you're excluded, and if another female MRA comes into the group, we say you're excluded. There are unfortunately people who are trying to do this, and I've seen some of them online. Thankfully, like 99% of the people that I've met within the MRM are very, very, very inclusive, which is awesome. But I've seen a lot of other people who are very, very much, anti-inclusive. I've seen people say things like, I've seen people say that they're an MRA and then being blatantly homophobic. I've seen men claim to be MRAs and then write a post about how they think non-white men should not be allowed in the US, and I'm not talking about a man coming over to I don't know, have a business meeting or something. I'm talking about refugee men who actually really, really need help. You know, I've seen people say that they want men to have rights and everything, and then they make a transphobic post, and then they completely ignore transgender men, or they of course people have different opinions on this, but I think that transgender women issues should be somewhat included, because I do have a very big feeling that a lot of transgender women's issues are caused by misandry. What I mean by that is that when I see people say things like, I'm not going to allow, a man in a dress to walk into my sister's or my wife's or my mother's bathroom and assault them. I'm going to beat them up if I see a transgender woman. I've heard people say that. Now, to me, that doesn't sound like misogyny, because they're pretty much admitting that they don't even see transgender women as women. They see them as quote unquote men in a dress, which is horrible and disgusting. But that doesn't sound like it's it's misogyny. It sounds like it's coming from a misandrist view. That men are dangerous, men are sexual assault perpetrators, men harass women. So now I need to go into this bathroom that a transgender woman is trying to use, and I'm going to be harassing her. That's wrong. But to me, that doesn't sound like misogyny. That sounds like misandry. Because this person is an assigned male at birth person. And by the way, that's an actual term that transgender people use. I did not make that up. That sounds a hell of a lot like misandry, because you're treating someone badly because they are assigned male at birth. It definitely makes more sense to call that misandry rather than misogyny, right? So
They
I would
literally
say
have.
that
They
those issues should be included. Sorry, just 1 second. I would say that those issues need to be included, when we're talking about these things, not just because they affect trans women, but because they affect regular every single day, whether they're white or whether they're black, whether they're gay, straight, they affect whether they're trans, whether they're cisgendered, they affect men, because this whole thing about especially colored men, this whole thing about we can't let this type of man into our country because he's gonna hit our women or he's gonna rape our women. That comes from the same place that is saying that transgender women are a threat. you know there's a whole reason why so many transgender exclusive radical feminists are really radical misandrists as well. you know so it is definitely, I would definitely say that it's a men's rights issue. And laws are being passed to this effect. Maybe our Indian members can tell you apparently about some, what's it called, this special carriage in India for women on the bus. Only women are allowed to access it and that sort of thing. I'm not saying that I necessarily have a problem with that, but I'm just saying it does influence, our, how we look at things, and even it influences some policies. You know, it influences, a state where we view that, only women can be sexually assaulted and not men. It's the whole reason why so many countries don't have, adequate rape laws against men. Sorry, I mean, like, for men. Basically. So these issues are very big. They're intersectional, and the sooner people realize that the reason why people hate black men is not just because they're black, but also because they're men. The whole reason why we're really fearful of brown men is not because they're brown, it's because they're men. People need to realize this sooner or later, or this whole thing is just going to continue being perpetuated.
Yeah, that is true. Like, they really have to. They basically say that they even say that they would take a group like trans women and say, then they're repackaging this as them being men in order to justify violence, because they can't justify violence if there's a woman. So they have to make sure they have to like reimagine her as a man. And they also, like, when it comes to other groups of people, they basically have to like specifically rephrase the men, regardless of what race you're referring to, right? Basically all threat narratives that are racist against any race, they always have to repackage the men of any race of people as being a threat, and therefore encourage violence against that particular race of people. And then they will usually specifically refer to the men in order to make sure that, because they know that will make their violent racism more acceptable to more people, which kind of like says a lot. And that's something we acknowledge, at least. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, whether it's masquerading as an issue of race or an issue of transgender identity, it really is just that. It's just them putting another face on their willingness and eagerness to to aggress and affront people with a Y chromosome That's what they're doing. Before you said, Deja, that, it sounds more like misandry than misogyny. The reason it sounds more like misandry is because that's what it is.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's anything else, any other presentation of it, once you kind of start to pay attention, it becomes very clear. Yeah, that person is speaking up about about male immigrants to the West, to United States, whatever. They're focusing on their immigrant status or the fact that they're a different color or race, whatever. That doesn't matter. They're just saying that so what they're saying but sounds more acceptable. But what they have a problem with in their little heart of hearts is the fact that these are men. And because they are, it's just like everything else. It's just like internally, for ordinary men to be part of society, we don't get a free pass. I mean, we don't. We have to perform, we have to produce, we have to protect, we have to provide, or we risk being alone and defenseless and exposed, and unwelcome. And like I said, if it doesn't matter which other intersection you're talking about, if you drill down and pay attention, the real oppression is because this group of people or that individual person happens to be male or happens to have Y chromosomes. If it hadn't been for that, whatever was happening to him would have never happened. And that's just the way things are,
Yeah, that's true. But the main point we're trying to point out is that when it says intersections of oppression would always, if you compare, then the men of every single demographic, right, would basically the men of every single demographic would basically get treated badly for their other demographical identity, and also treated badly because of their gender, right? And that's also the point. So it's not just that it's only them because they're men, but that they are men are usually means that they're treated worse than the women, the female, the female of whatever demographic that are being treated.
Yeah. I mean, it isn't that it only is because they're male. It is because they are male and that is true whether it's a discussion of class issues or gender issues or race issues or social status issues such as being, immigrant or migrant. But like I said, if it wasn't about men at the core of it, then it would be much more difficult for these public statements about some unwanted party to be acceptable. Because let's face it, it doesn't matter whether it's a discussion of class issues or gender issues or race issues or status issues. When the discussion is about women, okay, it's about that group of women as the victim of, okay, but when it's about men, suddenly it's not identifying men, suddenly it's people, people of color, immigrant people, ordinary people, working class people. Okay, whenever you hear that, you just trade the word people for men because that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, I think we should actually talk about the intersectional thing quite a bit. Specifically to clarify for people listening, we don't mean it in the same sense that they do. What we mean it is in a much more broad sense, where it's it's in a much more natural sense rather than an ideological sense. our sense of the word is encompassing real world data rather than basically just what they're pulling out of their backsides because they hate particular people. And the way we're using it is basically a racist might see a black person as like equivalent to a murderer in our eyes, but then if they're male, they add in like potential rapist and all these other things, and like they just step up a whole lot more purely because they're male, and it's just like a cumulative thing with them. It is pretty much what I'm saying. Oh, also, by the way, before I stop talking, I wanted to talk about just how many positive tweets we've seen about International Men's Day on Twitter, particularly from confirmed accounts and companies. We've got CBBS for grown-ups. That's the parenting account for CBBS. They're tweeting about dads who have lost their babies and who are doing like a fundraiser through football. We've got Derby County football team. We've got just so many. We've got Shore Trust, who are a company dealing with mental health issues. And there just seems to be like a massive positive amount of support on Twitter, even though we also have these people who are trying to take it away from us. So we should not let
Hey,
these people think.
men are human. Sorry, guys, I'm massively late, but
Maybe don't like jump in the middle of somebody talking. I was just going to finish saying that I've lost my train of thought completely.
About the positive ones, and then someone is taking it away.
Yeah, okay. So so we shouldn't let the fact that these people are trying to take it away from us mean that we feel sour about the event. We shouldn't let them take it from us. Like I've been noticing a couple of tweets in that he for she thing where people are saying, oh, it's like acting like it's their day, they can just have it. But no, that's the wrong attitude. We should be taking it back from them. Though most of the tweets are like rebuking them on that. We should be fighting against that, and we should be promoting all of the other content where people are, being basically supporting the day, which is the majority, the vast, vast, vast majority are supportive tweets, aren't backhanded at all.
That's nice.
can you send me the mental health resource Men Are Human company?
Sure.
Thank you. I need that for my server that I have.
No problem. I think you can contact them through the NHS for best effect.
Okay, thank you.
One clarification I want to make about the intersectional point, which is I agree with you, you're correct about that. But I also like to add is that one important distinction that we made when we talk about that compared to when less good faith actors are talking about it is that we don't like presume that one demographics are always worse off than one other demographics. Like to example, it could be two different groups of men who are two like mutually exclusive demographics, right? And both of them could be oppressed or mistreated or disadvantaged in different ways that the other one isn't. And then there could be an intersection for both of them because they are of the male gender, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that the real point that we're getting at is that issues need to be looked at from a viewpoint, not always that, let's say for example, if you have two oppressed groups, let's say for example you have LGBTQ people and women, and now if you want to consider women as oppressed, then they'll say things are going to be worse for black women than they're going to be worse for black men, right? But this is really demonstrably false, right? A lot of the issues that plague black people mostly happen to black men, right? So it's very, very much that we need to look at oppression from from a gender sensitive lens, right? And I don't just mean, oh, it must be horrible for women if it's bad for men. No, I mean actually look at it, from not a biased point of view, but just actually look at it, you know. No one wants to do that. Even people in academia don't really want to do that. They don't want to admit, that men are more likely to be, you know, treated this way, not just because of their color, but because of their gender. No one wants to admit that. So now we have a situation where um okay, I'm just giving an example. This doesn't have to be true, but let's say for example you have a certain group X, right? And they're an oppressed group. And then there's some women in that group, and then there's some men in that group. And then they say that, let's say for example most of the bad things are happening to men in that group. So they'll say these people are oppressed, so we're going to distribute sources or resources for them so that people help them, and they get help, instead of staying as oppressed, right? The resources are going to go half to women or half to men, or even majority will go to women, because they'll just assume that women are extra oppressed, and that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying, right? Um, I don't think if I have an example of this on hand, I'll think of an example, but I've seen it happen. Basically, I've seen it happen. Where they don't want to solve an issue. They want to make things better for the women and completely ignore that it happens to men, you know? So that's the issue. It's kind of like what's happening with education today. People say, well, women are oppressed when it comes to education. You know, I thought it was just Western countries, but I found out that even if you count all the degrees in the world, not just in Western countries but in the world, men all over the world are less likely to get a university degree than women. For women, it's around 44%, and for men it's around 38%. So if you count all of the countries in the world, it's still lower for men than it is for women, right? But still, many countries, they're going to have women's only scholarships, women's only universities, but very few men's only universities. They're still going to have women's only special programs, women only grants, that sort of thing. Because again, they'll just assume that women are being oppressed. So that is the kind of issue that we need to educate people on. And I know it's going to be very controversial because things like Black Lives Matter and the sort are quite controversial. Leave alone the gendered aspect, but we need to talk about the gendered aspect as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, that,
like I said, when these discussions are had among ourselves, we need to avoid discussions of X people. If it's something about some group of men, then we need the courage to be able to say this is this group of men that are suffering this issue. I we still haven't even gotten over that ourselves when it comes to talking about transgender people. There are transgender women and there are transgender men. And the issues specific to transgender men, okay, are different a lot of the time from the issues faced by transgender women, women who were assigned male at birth. Men assigned female at birth, very often their issues and their discussions don't even rise to the level of anybody's attention. Once they once they identify as male and they start going through the world as men, suddenly they become invisible. Then they're just people. And like I said, one thing we can do to counteract that is to be specific, to be able and willing to say that we are talking about men of color, immigrant men, transgender men, working class men, homeless men. And the irony is that I hear that more from women in our movement than I do from the other guys. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about the issues of Y chromosome owners, and that's very uncomfortable, and it's not that much fun to talk about. But if we don't ever talk about it, how can we expect Forbes magazine to? Because they have made it very clear over and over again, they don't care about us. They're not mad at us. They just don't care. And they have every reason not to, They're making money and getting all the political and media and social support they want by ignoring us. So they're not going to stop doing that until they have a reason to.
I would also like to add a thing is that even though I want to care about the how different types of men face gender-based and other forms of oppression, I also want to add that not everybody who is an MRA have to care about that from that lens, or nor do they have to care about all men's rights issues in particular. But what they have to is that they cannot oppose MRAs who do care
Yeah.
about those.
Yeah.
They can say, I'm gonna leave it to the other MRAs to deal with, right? But they cannot oppose other MRAs to deal with it. That's my point.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's never a good idea to try to coerce people to care about everything. I've never been a father, and I'm not going to be a father. So it's more, I want to say, more effort on my part to really focus and really pay attention to the issues that fathers face. But the fact is that because I land on so many other issues that men face, that I have to basically tell myself, I personally am not a father, but if I don't, I guess, if I don't see the father as my brother as much as I see the homeless man as my brother, or the gay man as my brother, or the assigned female at birth man as my brother, then why would I expect these fathers to stand for me? That's the kind of thing. It's like willingness. Nobody can give you a dose of willingness. It's something that has to be generated from within. But you're right. I mean, we can't afford at this point, to start pressuring each other, to care about everything, because they, I mean, they may not be as fortunate as I am. They, if it's a man whose biggest issue is that they're homeless, he may have a harder time worrying about, circumcision. He might not be circumcised, but he is going to care about male homelessness because he's male and he's homeless, for whatever, advantages that I have in this arena. It's my responsibility. It's my responsibility, to support him. I don't see it as necessarily his responsibility to support me. If his experiences are different, until he's willing to. And I suppose he's not going to be willing to until I show him that I'm going to support him. And same thing goes for fathers. Same thing goes for gay men and transgendered men, men who are immigrants or of color. If I don't show enough good faith to give that person an incentive to care about me, I don't think he's going to. He might try, and he might put on a dog and pony show to make it look like it, but it won't stick. it won't stay with him. So, like I said, if there's any kind of, I guess, MRA issue that doesn't affect me directly, then, like I said, it's up to me, and it can only be up to me to either really get behind it or not, and nobody's going to be able to remake me into somebody that cares. That's why I found it so easy to care about the women that that join with us, because they got problems too. They are not the same problems I have, but they are definitely problems. And if I can't say, well, that matters to me, then why should the things that affect me matter to them? It's not really that complicated. And like I say, what separates us from these adversarial forces is that by and large, we're able to do that, and they just not. I can't, for all the women I know who have joined us, they all have a story to tell about how they got kicked out of the club over there because, they didn't fit the mold and they didn't conform to the narrative. It happens again and again and again, and the way that we can be better than that is by just saying, you have issues, I have issues. They're not all the same, but if we don't hang together, we will hang separately.
It's well said.
Absolutely.
Can I say something?
Go on, Adam.
Sure.
Adam, sorry.
I think, honestly, that the more that we start, I think we have to trade our tragedies, because there are some things that, yes, as a woman, it feels like a tragedy to me. I hate the fact that basically, I'm going to make a reference here. I hate that because my body loans me an egg every month. If I don't give you said baby, I have a very painful, reminder of that. I hate that. I don't like that for myself. However, I can also understand how, prostate cancer is nowhere near funded as much as, let's just say, women who get breast cancer. That's an issue. That's a very, very big health issue. And both of them should be acknowledged and recognized and say, hey, I have an issue here. Is there any way that we can fix that? Mm-hmm. Maybe by making my tampons free, I'll give money to prostate cancer research.
Yeah, I mean, it's that part of it is it's transactional enough and sustainable enough that, for example, things like that painful reminder once a month, is, I don't resent or disregard that difficulty. It means something to me. But the reason that it means something to me is because I know that, the women in my life and the women around the world, have the ability to care about me and my problems, which are not monthly reminders. It sometimes it does come down to, like I say, these trade-offs, these transactions, this ability to put myself in the other person's shoes for a minute, at least long enough, not to get outraged when I find out that, what was it? One of the states in the United States, I believe Minnesota, is going to ban the sales tax on tampons and some other feminine hygiene products. It's like, I'm okay with that, because the women, who know me well enough to really care about me, they have that problem too, and
Let me tell you, this mess hurts.
But like I said, some of this, even in our movement and within our circle, there's this impulse to overcomplicate some of this stuff in order to be angry about it. And we really don't have to do that. Like I said, we can be inclusive and intersectional and supportive of of other people's issues that are not our own, because we can. I mean, we are capable of it, and it's worth it. Because to the degree that I can have compassion for and be supportive of, a lesbian woman who is in our movement, to that degree, it's more likely that that person will be supportive of me. But if I say the only thing I care about is men's issues and straight white men's issues, and the rest of y'all can go to hell, why should anybody bother with me? As a straight white male in America, I am very easy to ignore. I am very easy to forget, and I don't want that. I could live that way, but I would be miserable. It's worth it to me, like I said, to be inclusive and to just be honest enough to admit that I am not the only one who has problems, even though I have many. So yeah, it's like I said, not that complicated.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
wish it was treated that way by others. I mean, it's the hostility we get is very strange to me. Before I came across this movement, I wouldn't have dreamed that any movement of people simply seeking equality who aren't, proposing anything awful or despicable, and who have good points and who are completely fact based and, are trying to support rape victims and domestic abuse victims and so on, that they would be subjected to the level of outright hostility we have from major charities who, in their name, quite often have the word equality and who say that they are promoting equality between the sexes, who are who say that they are on the side of these people, but then relentlessly attack them. It's just
Right,
bizarre.
because it goes from being an initiative by a group of people to an institution, and once that line is crossed, then they they have to produce a narrative, and if they produce the wrong one, they can talk about equality all day long, but as you say, their actions demonstrate that they are no longer interested in equality. Now they are interested in keeping their golden goose laying eggs. Okay. And that's really what that's
I
about.
don't know with that though. Is like, I think we've gotten to a point in the world where things are more about power than negotiation nowadays. One of the biggest skills of the past, wow, English, is diplomacy. Was diplomacy, and we don't practice diplomacy anymore. You don't see negotiation going well anymore. You don't see people negotiating at all. At this point, it's become about power. How many people do you have to topple to get where you need to be? How to be the most powerful person. We teach power nowadays. We don't teach negotiation, and so that has seeped into the bigger issue.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I don't really think that our opponents, who we are not the ones opposing them, they're the one opposing us, we're just retaliating. I don't actually think that our opponents see a reason to negotiating, because why would you negotiate with people when you can get everything you want your way without any question? Like, they don't need to negotiate with us because they have all the power. And if they have all the power, they're bigger and stronger, and they have the gun, and we don't, then they can just force everything to be their way, regardless of what we think about it. Which is evil.
Also, they'll say we don't negotiate with terrorists. Haha, joke.
Yeah, then they are being terroristic by terrorizing people.
It is a joke, and in the cold light of day, it's funny because it's ridiculous. But going back to Darkish's comment about being able and willing to negotiate, I think most of you understand where I'm at with that. The interplay between power and negotiation is something that we're too often unwilling, to address among ourselves. Is that we, at least men, ordinary men, we, at least in theory, have the power to pull the plug on the whole thing, to bring civilization to its knees in a month. But we don't do that. We never do that. It's an unthinkable idea. So, because the forces arrayed against us understand that, okay, they they exercise power rather than negotiation because they know they can. They understand very clearly that if men organized and collectively, said, look, if this doesn't change, we're going to stop the whole show. Okay. But again, they understand that, for most men specifically, that's unthinkable, where it's just to be avoided at all costs. And that makes us vulnerable, when we try to negotiate, when we try to negotiate and when we try to present reason, we can simply be disregarded because, like I say, these adversaries understand that, we're at least so far unwilling, to negotiate that from any strength. We have to come to the table, with our hand out and our hat in our hand and asking for a space, and as you guys all know, I am at an age and a point in my life where I'm just not willing to do that anymore.
Well, I'm much, much younger and I'm not willing to participate. Like, if I could choose between making society go the way it is, just letting it collapse, honestly, I don't really mind any country in particular, regardless of what country I might add, failing, because I don't think it's treating me with it's a
right. They don't treat you like a whole human being, and that it is an effort to speak in their defense. It is an effort and a sacrifice and a voluntary retraction of their position in order for them to to see us as whole human beings and to treat us as whole human beings. It is. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I go back to Forbes magazine. The way things are right now, they wouldn't be caught dead treating ordinary men like whole human beings. Okay. They just won't, because they know it would be a sacrifice. They know it would cost them. Okay.
I think that's being way too kind to them, but I do realize it would cost them. But honestly, we've seen a lot of these charities and people like that will team up to exclude us from the conversation. So I don't feel really that we can be even as kind as you're being. It's like they'll do it not just to preserve their power, but simply because they can, I think.
Yeah, sorry. I want to make clear not to confuse my objectivity with kindness. I'm delivering a report on things as they are. The moral, like I always say, all of this is morally repugnant and ethically unsustainable. It is. I predict dark times ahead, but like I said, that doesn't stop it from. I understand why institutions like Wall Street and the various governments around the world and the economic movers and shakers. I understand why they don't, why they don't see us as whole human beings. But that does not mean that they shouldn't see us as whole human beings. It just means that they don't. It's
Yeah,
it's morally repugnant, but the good news is it's also not sustainable. They're not going to get to keep doing things this way forever. The clock is ticking. They can either fix it now or fix it later.
Well, let's hope society doesn't completely break down before it does get fixed. I mean, I do notice that there are some little signs that the pendulum is swinging back the other way. I have seen like Robot Chicken attacking the Miss Monopoly game. This week we've had the BBC ejecting a certain woke organization who have been extremely dangerous to, like, well, the public in the sense of their narrative. I won't mention who it is, but you can probably find it out quite easily. We've had quite a few things. I actually made a little list earlier if
What
people want me
happened?
to wrangle it out.
You
Sorry?
don't have to say the name, but what happened to them? Like what were they saying that was dangerous?
Well, they were just getting more and more woke by the day. It's well, to be honest, I probably should just say it's Stonewall. They used to be a great
Oh,
organization. Yeah. And
yeah,
the
I thought they were
BBC,
good because weren't they like an LGBTQ organization, if I'm not wrong?
they are, but they've been going a little bit insane in the last few years. I noticed it a couple of years ago when I was at university, and one of the people associated with the LGBT group there wanted to gather information to help the group because it's a brand new group. So he asked, I basically went on a fact finding mission to him. I got him a bunch of resources and stuff, and one of those resources was like the number for Stonewall. He called them
Mm-hmm.
up. They asked him his sexuality. He said straight. They instantly hung up on him. So even though he was trying to help, like, he was excluded.
Yeah.
But that's a very mild example of something they've done. They are extremely woke. They are the woke. They are woke-tastic. But the issue is that I think these groups have done so much damage that we maybe won't be able to recover. But I do have a lot of hope that there is a recovery and it's happening right now, because I have seen stuff like there was a school which ousted its parent-teacher board because it's some sort of some sort of board or something. I can't remember what it was. Some sort of governing board, and it's because they were hyper woke, and we've had quite a few examples of this. I'm worried that it's going to swing back the other way, but like all the way the other way, and we'll go to some other extreme where you know you know what I mean. But it's I am hopeful that we will swing back, and we'll, at least for a little while, we'll be somewhere in the middle, and we won't have to worry about them destroying people because they said something mildly adjacent to something offensive. Like John Cleese recently, this was another thing actually. John Cleese quit a speaking engagement he had because somebody else at the same who's going to speak at the same event or at the same college anyway was excluded, blacklisted because he did a Hitler impression. Not that he was a Nazi supporter, that he did an impression mocking Hitler. So the guy was actually on the correct side, but he still got blacklisted because he he did something related to the Nazis, even though that thing related to them was mocking them. So John Cleese says, well, I've done the same thing, so I'm going to blacklist myself. And I think we need more like that. If we've got more like that, we'll be able to starve them out because they won't be able to talk to, they won't be able to arrange events with big celebrities like John Cleese and so on and so forth. And they'll start to realize that the public is actually completely against them. And the only way they're able to do this is because they have the reins, they have the power. And if they didn't have the power, then, it would just be over. But what the public needs to realize is that they actually have more power than these people, and that these people only have power because the public gives them that power. It's like all these woke things on Netflix and stuff like that. If people tuned out of Netflix because of them, then Netflix would have to change its tune or it would go bust. I mean, if the public wanted to, they could take down a company as big as Netflix quite easily. But it's just a case of, do they want to? Is there enough hate in the air for this kind of just, this kind of racism and sexism that's being promoted at the moment in the name of equality?
Yeah. Now, what you had said, Ma, about seeing small hints that the pendulum is swinging back the other way, and that there's hope for recovery. I'm a big believer in wherever possible, to when things are bad, to be able to recover the good, whatever that is. But at the same time, because we're sort of the tip of the spear, so to speak, as things swing back, quote, in our direction, then we have to be mindful and responsible, and forgiving, and reasonable, because if we're not, if things start going our way and, we start becoming retributive, vengeful, that's going to be a problem. And, because we are men, if we do that, then we will lose whatever ground we've gained, and we will be right back where we started. So the unfortunate reality is that, yeah, wherever possible, that we recover our place of good faith in our communities and in our civilizations. But at the same time, it's not going to be, we can never be what we were, 100 years ago. And we shouldn't want to, we should want to be willing and able to make something, better than whatever has been. The worst thing about being human is that, I've always said it, we're adaptable, and, we over time can start to accept the things that are really unacceptable, and 50% of that is on us. So if things are getting better, that's great. The biggest mistake we can make, if that's really happening, is to take it for granted and start feeling entitled. Then we have to we have to be wiser than the people that we've been pushing back against all these years, because otherwise they will have already won, and that we'll be having the same conversation in 10 years that we're having right now, and that's not good enough.
I think by 10 years' time, it will be too much. it will just be, it will have, there will have been too much damage. But if we stop it now, I think we can recover, because there are still people who remember what it was like when it was good and when we had this balance of people, being, getting rid of racism and stuff like that, but at the same time not encouraging like zealotry and stuff like that against because what they're doing at the moment is they've got this mentality of vengeance against specifically men, especially men, and they think that the more men they can destroy, the better it will be. But this is just madness. It's tearing down society. And there are people who will say, yeah, this society's broken, let's tear it down. But that's not going to help. It takes hundreds and hundreds of years to build society. We have to repair society and make it better. And it can be done. But if people just tear it down and destroy it, then they don't know how bad it can be. It's what we have now is a utopia compared to what it would be if we tore down society. Because if we did tear down society, it would probably end up rebuilding as something like China or worse. I mean,
or better.
Before or better, unlikely. It
Well,
might
well,
end
I
up
mean,
worse.
something about China.
That's like kind of like oddly specific. Like to me, like I believe that all the countries today are either basically all developed countries are just too oppressive to be justified, and all the non-developed countries are either too oppressive, or when they aren't developed enough to be as good as as more developed countries should be. So I don't support tearing down anything, but I do, however, am very much fine with letting most countries fail and still work on focusing on improving things for people and society, rather than to care about maintaining the country's laws, because I don't see the point
I mean,
in that.
something to. Oh, sorry.
If
Something
society
to.
fails, it tends to end up. If America fails as a society, it won't go back a bit and then rebuild itself. It'll turn
No,
into
you're yeah. It'll be like human sacrifice and cannibalism. If America goes down, it's going to fall hard, like really
it'll
hard,
take the whole West with it.
most likely. But going back to reparation and improvement, we here internally have to come to grips with the reality that we really can't expect a return to the good old days in any way, shape, or form. They are gone forever, and they are not coming back. And we have to be okay with that. We have to be able to say, whatever things that were before that we've lost, that we can still use, okay, let's put those back in place. But for the rest of it, like I said, we have to be clever. We have to be creative and say, this is door number 1, this is door number 2. Where's door number 3? What is the thing that no one has yet thought of that we can use to make things better for everybody?
I mean, so what I have seen, at least on this server, most people here are generally progressives or at least centrists. So I don't really think that, like, most people here are not really wanting to go back into the good old days. They just want to, like, find that third door that you're mentioning. And I think that's kind of the center of the MRA, to just create a third door which benefits both men and women.
Basically, well, benefits really across the spectrum, because again, same thing, in the position that we're in, we of necessity have to be inclusive, really of everyone who is willing to stand with us, because otherwise, we don't differentiate. we don't stand out, so to speak. And one of the things that is kind of door number 3-ish, I suppose, is that every problem I have as a man, as a straight white man in America, every issue that I face, everything that bothers me, et cetera, is 10 times worse for somebody not only around on the other side of the planet, but in some cases just down the street from me. And like I said, for what we had in place before everything started falling apart, is the whole reason that all of that happened. And instead of, like I said, we have to be humble and wise and forgiving, because instead of me getting mad at, some like online feminist that said kill all men, you know what? I'm not going to be mad at that person. Okay, they are damned to be who they are until things get bad enough for them that they join us. But once they do, then they they have to be acceptable, and we have to have something to offer other than let's go back to patriarchy and nationalist nation states. I said, that's never going to work again. We might as well just face it. That's dead now.
To be honest, I think we're probably going to end up being very nationalist in the near future if China starts taking over a large section of the world. It's going to make everyone very nationalist. But I get what you mean. We can't really go back to the good old days, because the good old days weren't really that good in a lot of respects. But we should just try to repair our society so we don't do what Iran did and start off having a nice society and then just crash and turn into Iran.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves and admit that, even if things go our way, there are an uncountable number of ways for us to screw it up, and maybe just a few small number of ways for us to get it right. I mean,
yeah. Also, like, speaking about China, like, China is one of the like, you talking about how going back to the good old days, like, in many ways that's kind of what China tried to do. Like, I get that, like, there was Mao with populism and communism and all that, but like, China today is mostly like a bureaucratic state more than anything, which like promotes a lot of nationalism.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, today's China is a lot more similar than like any country on earth was in its with its past. Like, China is very much a very like conservative and unchangeable force in this world.
Right. But we can at least point to them and say, the reason that they're making their populace so miserable is just the simple fact that they're trying to resurrect, a zombie. They're trying to remake a conservative nationalist, protectionist culture. And it's not favorable. And my own attitude about China, for example, is that same thing. Even if everything goes their way, which it might, they're going to find themselves like the man riding the tiger. The thing he needs to fear the most is getting off the tiger, because the tiger's going to be mad. There's how many people in China right now? What's their current population?
1.2 billion approximately.
Yeah, that's a lot of people to piss off, and they may get angry enough that they'll be capable of anything. You know, and that's, like I said, that's not what they are doing is not an answer. You know, we have to be cleverer than that.
Well, I honestly kind of hope that they do find out that the Chinese population isn't as nationalist as they've been portraying, because it's very nationalist. But we are getting very, very off topic. So I think that it is time to wrap this one up. Darkisha, could you take us out, please?
Sure. So thank you everyone for coming to our weekly chat this week on Men's Human Rights Discord. Just a reminder, next Friday is International Men's Day. So keep your eyes open for posters. If you want access to our posters that we are doing, you can go to menarhuman.com, print out your own. They're going to be all over. We plan on putting them on social media, the streets of our cities, spread them as much as we can. And we will be here next week, 4 p.m. UK time, which is 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern on Friday. Right, Well, so thank you all for this wonderful chat.